These five bosses, known as Capos, were instrumental in building their gangs into the national crime syndicate known as La Cosa Nostra, aka the Mob. Number 1. Al Scarface Capone. Al Capone's parents emigrated from Naples to Brooklyn, where the gangster-to-be was born in 1899. Al was a B student until he quit school in the 6th grade. He grew up in a rough neighborhood and joined two kids' gangs, the Brooklyn Rippers and the 40 Thieves. He had jobs as a candy store clerk, a cutter in a bookbindery, and a pinboy in a bowling alley, but soon found he could make better money working for gangsters. He went to work for gangster Frankie Yale at his Brooklyn Inn, where he insulted a patron. Her companion attacked Capone with either a knife or a razor, which is how Capone got the wounds that gave him the nickname Scarface. By 1918, Capone had killed 2 men and he fled to Chicago, where he started working for mobster Johnny Torrio. One of Capone's first jobs was to kill Torrio's boss. He was careful to arrange an alibi for the murder, a precaution he kept to during his career. He quickly became Torrio's second in command, and Torrio, as the new boss, assigned Capone to manage bootlegging, prostitution, and gambling operations in Chicago and its suburbs. In 1925, a rival tried to assassinate Torrio, who left Chicago for Italy, leaving the business to Capone. Capone lived large and made headlines like a movie star. He controlled Chicago's politicians and police, and was set to rule the city. He also launched ruthless wars on rival bootleggers, and on February 14, 1929, at a garage at 2122 North Clark Street, Capone's men and their machine guns mowed down 7 rival gangsters in what came to be known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The massacre brought Capone to national attention as public enemy number 1. But the authorities had trouble pinning a crime on the man who always had an alibi and who owned the Chicago police force. Finally, an IRS investigator accidentally found incriminating receipts that sent Capone to the Atlanta Federal Prison in 1939 for tax evasion. Capone ran his organization from prison until 1934, when he was transferred to Alcatraz to cut him off from his gang and the outside world. By 1938, he was serving his sentence in the prison hospital, suffering from dementia brought on by syphilis. After his release in 1939, he retired to his estate in Palm Island, Florida. He died of natural causes in 1947. Number 2. Charles Lucky Luciano. Born in 1897, Lucky Luciano moved to New York from Sicily when he was 9. His Sicilian heritage put him in a good light with Joe the Boss Masseria, head of one of the most powerful gangs in New York. In 1929, Masseria was at war with Salvatore Moranzano, the leader of a rival gang. Each man wanted to be capo di tutti capi, or boss of all bosses. Since Luciano worked for Masseria, Moranzano's men attacked him and left him for dead. But instead of taking revenge, Luciano cut a deal with them. He arranged Masseria's execution in 1931, took over from Masseria, and let Moranzano become the boss of all bosses, for about 6 months. Then Luciano had Moranzano killed too. With both old bosses gone, Luciano revamped what became known as La Cosa Nostra. Luciano allowed New York's 5 bosses to run their own crime families. They and major crime bosses from around the country each held a place on the commission, which had the power to settle disputes for LCN, which was now a national crime syndicate. Under Luciano, LCN concentrated on making money from gambling, extortion, loan sharking, arson, and labor racketeering, and even started investigating illegitimate businesses. Lucky's luck ran out in 1935 when the authorities convicted him for running a prostitution ring. Luciano controlled his crime family from prison until he was deported to Italy in 1946. He died of a heart attack in Naples in 1962. Number 3. Meyer Littleman Lansky. Born Meyer Sokolansky in 1902 in Grodno, Russia, Meyer Lansky came to New York with his family when he was 9. The studious mayor was known as a good Jewish boy until he teamed up with Bugsy Siegel to form the Jewish Bugs Meyer gang, which specialized in auto theft, gambling, and racketeering. The small-statured Lansky provided the planning and financial know-how, while Siegel and his friends provided the muscle. In 1920, Prohibition was the law of the land, so Lansky and Siegel joined forces with their old friend Lucky Luciano, fortune selling liquor to speakeasies. In 1931, Lansky helped Luciano rise to power and create La Cosa Nostra. The LCN grew so powerful that Lansky later described it as bigger than U.S. Steel. The mob was pulling in millions, and the bosses were coming to Lansky for financial advice. Some historians believe that Lansky, nicknamed the Mob Accountant, actually ran the mafia through Luciano. In any case, Lansky stayed under law enforcement's radar. After Prohibition ended, Lansky opened illegal gambling casinos in New York, New Orleans, and Florida. They were so profitable that when Lansky wanted to open some offshore casinos in the 1950s, Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista welcomed him into Havana. Bugsy Siegel's hotel casino in Las Vegas had lost so much money that the commission had killed him in 1947. Lansky ordered the execution, but Lansky stayed alive and in power because he made crime pay. Even Lansky couldn't win forever, though. In 1959, he lost $7 million in mob money when Fidel Castro overthrew Batista and nationalized Cuba's casinos. In the 1970s, the feds went after him, so he fled to Israel. 2 years later, he was deported back to the United States. On his return in 1973, Lansky faced income tax evasion charges but was acquitted. He never spent a day in jail, but the FBI claimed that he had millions socked away somewhere when he died of lung cancer in 1983. Forbes magazine believed it too, listing him among their 400 wealthiest people in America in 1982. Number 4. Frank, the Prime Minister Costello. Francesco Castiglia was born in Cosenza in southern Italy in 1891 and arrived in New York's East Harlem with his family when he was 4. By age 24, he was serving 10 months in prison for carrying a gun. As an ex-con, Costello vowed he would reform. He'd commit crimes, but let other people carry the guns. Costello became close friends with Lucky Luciano in 1920. In 1937, when Luciano was in jail, Costello became the acting boss of the powerful Luciano crime family. Costello was known as a prime minister because he expanded his power not with violence, but by using negotiation and bribes. He was always expensively dressed, with a carefully cultivated front of respectability. He was rarely around when rough stuff went down. The Luciano crime family made huge profits in gambling, bookmaking, loan sharking, and labor racketeering under Costello, who used part of the profits to buy cops, politicians, and judges. Because J. Edgar Hoover refused to admit that the mafia was alive and well in America, some even said that Hoover was in Costello's pocket. Costello was making about $1 million a year, but life at the top wasn't easy. In 1946, Vito Genovese returned to New York when the Italian authorities sent him back to face his murder charge. Then, in 1950, the U.S. Senate set up the Kefauver Committee to investigate organized crime, with Costello as its main target. The combination, plus a desire to become a respected member of high society, drove an anxiety-ridden Costello to a psychiatrist, who advised him to start associating with a better class of people. After he was shot in 1957 by a hitman that Genovese had hired, Costello retired and let Genovese take over. But he got his revenge. Working in secret, Costello set Genovese up on drug charges that sent him to prison his way without using a gun. Costello died of a heart attack in Manhattan in 1973. Number 5. Albert Lord High Executioner Anastasia. Born in 1902 in Tropea, Italy, Anastasia was a seaman who jumped ship and entered the United States illegally when he was about 17. He worked as a longshoreman, where his need for anger management became apparent when he quarreled with a fellow workman and killed him. Anastasia served only 18 months for the crime because the witnesses who could have kept him in prison disappeared. Anastasia often worked alongside Lucky Luciano, and when Luciano made his bid for power, it was rumored that Anastasia worked for him as an executioner. When the commission was set up, Anastasia helped head up its enforcement arm, Murder Inc. Working out of a Brooklyn candy store until the 1940s, Murder Inc. is said to have killed hundreds of people in the service of La Cosa Nostra. Anastasia was never prosecuted for any killings because witnesses against him still had a way of disappearing. In 1951, Anastasia became boss of what is now known as the Gambino crime family, one of the largest in New York. He managed it by killing the family's former boss and by staying in the good graces of Costello, who probably allied himself with Anastasia because the guy was so wild and violent that no one would touch his friends. Anastasia's ties with the longshoremen's union helped him grow rich and powerful, but he got too murderous, even for the mob. His enemies whispered that he was too crazy to be a boss. In addition, Vito Genovese wanted to become the boss of all bosses, and in order to gain the position, Anastasia and Costello needed to be killed. In 1957, Anastasia was shot and killed while he sat in a barber's chair at the Park Sheraton Hotel. Newspapers proclaimed at the time that the mob's worst murderer finally got the chair.